It's all about reaping profits, not just crops. It's financial planning for the entrepreneur. If you're looking to start a business in 2025 or beyond, then this is the video for you. Welcome to Modern Grower. Hello and welcome. I'm Diego, D-I-E-G-O. I'm a dad, a YouTuber, a podcaster, and a business owner. And you're going to get all of that experience over the next hour or so in this presentation. For the past 15 years, I've run several businesses. They would be what I would define as lifestyle businesses. Lifestyle businesses are businesses that are designed to support the style of life that you want to live, not just financially, but also time-wise. How do I want to live my life? How do I want to spend my time? How much money do I need? If I want to totally dedicate my life to something, I'd probably go down that route and start the next Amazon or SpaceX, or raise venture capital funding, work 100 hours a week and try and sell it off for $1 billion. That's not what I'm trying to do. That's not what most of you are trying to do. Most of us are just trying to find a business that can support us and our family so we can live the type of life that we want to live where we want to live, and work the hours that we want to work. There's obviously flexibility in there, but that's what we're going for. So today I'm going to share what I've learned in the past 15 years running businesses. I'm going to tap into some of my previous life's experience because I used to be a stockbroker before this. So my background is deeply rooted in the finance world. And I want to share this because I think it matters. This is information I wished I had had when I started a business, because starting a business and running a business isn't easy at all. It's very hard. It's stressful financially. It's stressful mentally. So hopefully this can help take some of that stress load off and make things a little bit easier. Because planning is half the battle. If you plan, you know what to expect. You know what might be coming. There's no surprises. Typically, when you plan, you're planning in a calm time. You're not making decisions in the heat of the moment. It's those heat of the moment decisions where we say something we wish we didn't, and we, take too many drinks and do crazy things that we shouldn't do. Where in the Zen calm, we can think about things rationally. We can look at numbers. We can look at data, and we're not so swayed by emotions. So that's how we're going to use financial planning as a tool when we look at starting a business, because that's what we're looking at in this presentation. I want to start a business. First, I need to do some financial planning. Financial planning is looking at your current rate of personal and business expenses and income and putting a plan in place so you can reasonably cover those in the future. Ideally, you cover them and have a bunch of surplus left over. So there's no surprises left on the table. A lot of people struggle with this. They don't plan. They live in the moment, and they fall victim to this chart here. This chart, simple diagram, is why most Americans don't have much money in the bank. You will gain wealth if your inflow is greater than your outflow. If you make more money than you spend, you increase wealth. It sounds obvious, but most people ignore this. They're too short-sighted to pay attention to this. They live in that YOLO moment. I'd rather go out tonight and do stuff. Hell with savings. I can worry about retiring in 40 years. Tonight, it's about tonight. And the danger of that is it's easy to spend money very quickly. We can all spend $10,000 in an instant on Amazon as long as the credit card lets us. How long would it take you to save $10,000 tax-free to pay that bill? A long time. So for most of us, in the lifestyle business phase of things, if we can get this chart right in our personal life and our business life, we will gain wealth. The business will gain wealth, and we, as the owner of the business, will thereby gain wealth. We have to look at this at two sides. We're looking ahead a little bit, because as a lifestyle business owner, you're closely tied to the business. If you overspend in your personal life, how are you going to pay for that? Well, the business is going to have to pay for that. So you might be sacrificing business growth to pay for overspending in your personal life. That's why we're going to talk about this. And this isn't just for you. This can also be for a spouse. So if you're very frugal and not spending much, but your partner is out there just living it up like a Kardashian without the Kardashian income, then you're in trouble. Whether you're doing that on the business credit card or the personal credit card, you're in the top section of this diagram. We want to be at the bottom. This is why financially planning matters here. It's super critical when you start a business, because when you're starting a business, you usually have a limited amount of funds with which to start that business. In many cases, the more money you can start with, the better situation you're in. And we can talk about that later, because more funds can be used to do more things and maybe accelerate the growth of a business. More funds take the stress off. And I'm not saying more funds means more funds that we should spend. It's just a little additional security, because your family and your stress is most likely tied directly to the amount of the money in the bank. And I've looked at a ton of research on this. People who struggle financially are depressed, have problems with substance abuse, get divorced, commit suicide, all sorts of bad things. And there's definitely a tie between financial situation and those things. Because when people don't have enough money to cover their expenses, they start worrying, how am I going to pay for it? And that's incredibly stressful. I've definitely been in that position. And some people, when they get in that type of stress, they turn to vices to relieve the stress, or in some cases, the ultimate, they take their own life. And I don't want anybody to ever go through that. So let's do some planning in the front to keep ourselves whole, keep our families whole, and keep our businesses whole. And to do that, we need to design a business that supports the lifestyle that we want to live. We need to look at how much money we're going to need to survive. We're going to need to look at how extravagant of a life we want to live. If you want to be driving a Bentley and going to Ruth Chris and hanging out with people in Las Vegas every other weekend, you better have a business that generates a lot of income. If you're just looking to live a simple life, pay your bills, save for the future, save for retirement, that's much more achievable. But we have to realize that's what we're going for. We have to want that, and we all have to commit to that. And this is why financial planning is very, very important. So one of the first things we need to ask about the business is, what does it have to do? What's the goal of the business? Not why do we want to start it, not what's the goal in the marketplace for the business. What's the goal for the business as it relates to our life? Why are you doing it? My daughter has a little side hustle business that she's doing For her, she doesn't even care so much about the money. It's soul food for her. It's experience. She's doing it with a friend. It's fun. That's the goal. The goal isn't to get rich. The goal isn't to make a ton of money. The goal isn't to change the world. It's to do a hobby that she loves to do, pay for it, have fun with friends, and learn and share along the way. So she can design her business that way. If that's your business, that's great. If you grow a bunch of tomatoes and decide I want to make the most amazing tomato sauce, and I'm going to sell a little bit, and my goal every year is to pay for all the cost of the tomatoes, pay for all the cost of my own jars, so I got all my tomato sauce for free, make a little bit of profit at the end of the day, then that's the business. But that's very different than saying, we need a business that's going to support 3 kids, 2 adults, pay a mortgage, save some money for college, pay for cars, pay for kid activities, all that stuff. That's expensive, especially in California. So if I'm going to do that, which I've done, it better be a business that scales, because making $250 a month ain't going to cut it. That's a hobby. That's a little side hustle. That's an income stream. It's great. Nothing bad about that. But we can't be upset later on if it's like, this business isn't generating enough money. Well, did it ever have the chance to generate enough money to start? So let's ask these questions. Does it have to support your family now? Do you need the income from this business from day one-ish? How soon does the business have to be able to contribute to the family's income? It might not be right away, because maybe you have savings, maybe you have a spouse or partner that has another job to help you cover the cost of living expenses. Don't forget, just because we start a business, we don't suddenly get to go on God's tuition and live for free on the earth. We're still going to have insurance. We're still going to have a mortgage. We're still going to have car payments, utilities, kid expenses, all that stuff. How is it getting paid? Somehow it has to get paid. From our job, that's a full-time job, while we start a side hustle, from a partner's job, from savings. So you got to know, does it have to support your family now? If not, you can go about planning very differently than if it does. If it's not now, when does it? That's X time in the future. A year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. If I have a business that needs to support me now, I'm going to have to be more aggressive. I'm going to probably have to put more money into the business. My stress levels are definitely going to be way higher, because just because you work harder doesn't mean a business is necessarily going to work right away. Then if it's a slow climb to full-time income over 5 years, the 5-year approach is going to be a lot less stressful. You're trading time for stress. So what's important to you? I've talked to people who started a business it's bonus income, it's side income, it's that tomato sauce. I've talked to somebody who sold broiler chickens and eggs on the side. It was money that they would use for extra things for their family. It generated another $15,000 to $30,000 a year. That wasn't anybody's full-time income. They did it on nights and weekends. They did it with their kids as a learning experience. They did it for their community. They did it to raise food for themselves. The money gave them opportunities to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. That was their goal. And if that's your goal, that's great. Is the long-term goal for the business that it has to pay for itself? Is there a way for you to raise your own food, pay for it, and create some additional side income? I mean, that's the example I just talked about here. So if you had a pastured poultry operation and you raised 50 broilers a year, and you said, all right, my family will use 15, we'll sell the other 35. The 35 just has to pay for my 15. So that's what I mean by the long-term plan is the business has to pay for itself. And then you get all the benefit of that. If that's your goal, that's great. The key to all these is it has to be true. You can't tell yourself something. You can't say, well, I'm okay for this to pay for my lifestyle in 5 years. I want to go full-time in 5 years. And then you're pissed after 1 year that you can't go full-time. Or mixing up goals. You have to commit to it. You have to be realistic to it, or none of this is going to work that we're going to talk about. So you have to decide, what are you trying to get out of the business financially and when? The reality when people start digging into this is it may be a lot better for you to start your business later than now. And we're going to talk about that. Because if you don't have a lot of savings now, if you have a lot of debt now, if you're in a bad overall financial position now, starting a business isn't the best thing to do. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be expensive. And when you're already in a bad financial situation, that means that your life is going the wrong way financially. And that's probably already stressful. You don't need more stress on it. This is pouring gas on an out of control forest fire. We don't need that. So that's why we have to figure out, where are we at now financially? Whether you're starting a business or not, you should know this. Not every second of every day, but at least once a month, you should have some idea of, where are we financially? What money's coming in? What money is going out? How much do we save each month? How much does it cost us to live? We'll start looking at that. Because we need to know where we're at financially, because there's two pieces to the financial picture when you start thinking about starting a business. And a lot of times when people think about a business and the budget to start a business, they only focus on the business side of things. So if I want to start a market garden, I got to get a greenhouse and a BCS and a walk-in cooler and a Jang seeder and some hand tools. They don't account for their living expenses. Well, how are you going to pay for those living expenses? So that's what I'm calling life support. Life support is money you need to live your day-to-day. A car payment, car insurance, utilities, food, shelter, clothing, those types of things. Whether you have a business or not, you have those expenses. How are they going to get paid? And business support is money that the business requires to get started. You have to factor both of these in. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people focus on the right side of this slide, the business support, and not the left side. And that's a huge error, because you're leaving thousands of dollars of expenses off the financial equation. And that can be very scary when you go to flip the business switch and you realize, oh my God, where am I going to get all the money to pay for this stuff? So life support, what we need to support ourselves, tells us how much the business has to earn and by when. Knowing this, we'll decide what the business is, what it does, and where you sell the product. How big does it have to be? Is this something that can scale? It would be hard to scale a lemonade stand. It's easier to scale a taco shop. So if you know how much you need for life, if you're really frugal, if you're a single person in their 20s without a mortgage and you live at home and you don't have student loans and a bunch of car payments and all that type of stuff, you might be able to say a business that pulls in $1,000 a month at this stage of your life, that's awesome. For me in my 40s, a business that pulls in $1,000 a month won't cut it. needs to be much higher because I just have more expenses to support my life. So if I was to do this plan, I'll make this number up. I need $60,000 a year to cover my total annual expenses. Well, I need a business that's going to put out at least $60,000 a year of tax-free income at the end of it to pay for all that. So I need a business that could scale big enough to sell that much product. I need to have a product that I can sell that much of, and I need to sell it to a market that'll want to pay that price and buy it. But in order to get to where that number is, we need to look at our current financial situation as a person or a family unit. So look at yourself. Obviously, you're going to know what you are. Are you a single person or are you a family unit? We need to look at how much savings do we have? How much debt do we have? What are our expenses? And expenses can be fixed expenses, like your mortgage is probably the same every month. A variable expense might be food cost. And what is your income? Sorry, that should be a bullet point a little to the left. And we account for everyone in the family if there's multiple people. So everybody's income, everybody's savings, everybody's debt, all that stuff. Now we start to get a realistic picture of what are we starting with? Where are we at today? Let's take a deeper look. Savings. This is liquid savings. Liquid savings means stuff you can easily turn to cash. It's not a house. It's not a boat. It's not some piece of land that you own or some Pokemon card that's worth a ton of money. Stuff that's easily turn into cash. So savings account, checking accounts, brokerage and investment accounts. You could also count the bottom four, but I wouldn't be touching those. Those are things that if you've already saved those, it might be considered risky. I would consider it risky. Others might as well in the financial profession to cash out your 401k to start a business, to cash out an IRA or something like that. So you typically don't want to touch the bottom four unless your kids are going to starve or you actually are retired and you can tap into that 401k and it's time to spend it. The available savings that you have, I would look at in a few ways. It's liquid assets and savings in checking account. So we're going to say how much money is available to use as the business. Because if we go back to the previous slide, while 401ks, brokerage accounts, IRAs, that's available if we absolutely needed the cash. Hey, gun to your head, your kid was kidnapped. Get us $50,000. I'll cash out my 401k. Give me 3 days for the check to arrive. By the way, the kid doesn't like crunchy peanut butter. Don't let him die. So let's just look at liquid savings because these are available savings. Savings account. But just because, let's say you had $15,000 in your savings account and you want to start a business, how much are you willing to spend to start a business? All of it? Some of it? None of it? You're going to need some money. So how much are you going to spend? This is maybe an eye-opening question. Some people might just think, well, I have $15,000 in savings. I'm going to spend it all on the business. But don't you need an emergency savings account? I would have one. I do have one. You should too. What happens if a car breaks, a washing machine breaks, somebody gets hurt, you can't work? You're going to need some money saved up. So I wouldn't use all of your savings to start the business. So this is where you start to segregate accounts. We've saved up money. or we want to start a business. It's 2025 now. We want to start a business in 2026. We're going to save money to start that business. Half the money we save is going to go into emergency savings. Half is going to go into money that we can spend to start the business. You don't want to put it all in because there's never a guarantee that a business is going to work. And a lot of the money you spend starting a business, you can't easily get it back. It might be on services or things that are hard to sell. So you spend $15,000 to start a business. And even if you go to sell everything, you get a fraction of that back. You don't want to decimate your savings. You don't want to leave yourself without emergency funds. So be careful how you treat your available savings. I think everybody should have an emergency fund. How long, though, is that emergency fund good for? Emergency fund, I would say this is the portion of your savings that can sustain your monthly expenses for some period of time into the future. Scenario, you can't work. You got attacked by a wild dog and contracted rabies. You're laid up in a hospital watching Golden Girls reruns. As a result, you can't earn income for your family. But your family stays at home, and they still have to live. Little Johnny and little Sally, they sure are hungry. They can't wait for the rabies to get out of your system and for you to start working again so they can eat. They need to eat now. They don't want to eat boot leather and parts of the couch. So how are you going to pay for that? Emergency savings. You probably want at least 6 months worth. I think that's a good start. I know a lot of people are like, whoa, dude. 6 months worth of monthly savings? Are you kidding me? That's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And the scary thing is most Americans don't have 1 month of emergency savings. They live check to check to check. So this might be a reality check for you as the cue ball comes swinging around in the sock and boom, it just hit you in the head and you're just seeing dollar signs. Get with it here. It's real life. We're grown-ups. Manage your finances like a grown-up and realize that starting a business isn't a right, it's a privilege. And in order to take on this privilege, you need to prepare yourself ahead of time. This isn't joining the army where they take anybody. I don't know. Do they take anybody? They take most people. Now, I guess starting a business will take most people because, man, those credit card companies, they'll take anybody. And they really want anybody, especially the people that are going to mess up because they want that money, assuming they can collect on it. So create an emergency savings. Start there. The rest of your savings is spendable. But you need a portion of that that's going to support your life and a portion of that that's going to support the business. So let's do an example here. $30,000 in savings. Let's say our monthly expenses are $2,000. We'll take $10,000 and we'll put it aside for an emergency. That's in a different account. We're not going to touch that. That $10,000 will cover 5 months of expenses if we do nothing except watch those Golden Girls. The other $20,000 is available to start a business, but we can't spend all $20,000 on equipment and starting the business because if we start a business tomorrow, we still got to pay Mr. Mortgage and Mrs. Electric Company. So they're going to want actual money, not produce that we grow. So we'll put $10,000 aside for Mr. Mortgage and Mrs. Electric, and we'll put $10,000 aside to spend on equipment. That way, now we can pay for our living expenses while we run the business, and we have a 5-month runway to where the business has to start bringing money back. See where this is going? If you don't do this and you spend all 20, then suddenly it's like, whoa, where's Mr. Mortgage going to get paid from? Oh, that emergency savings, that's looking extra juicy just sitting over there. It's like wink, wink, winking at you like Jessica Rabbit or some Instagram model. Like, they slide into your DMs and have some weird name. And it's like, hey, how you doing? And you're like, It's probably some dude from Russia trying to get my credit card. So we're not going to touch the emergency savings. We're going to have our savings and we're going to divide it up between life support and business support. So this is what we do. You decide ahead of time how much we're going to carve out. In our example, what happens if at the end of the 5 months, there's not enough money coming in and the business needs more money? Or what if you put $10,000 into the business, but you grossly underestimated how much money you needed to start a business and it needs 15? Are you allowed to add much more money in? Now it's your bank account. You're allowed to do whatever you want, but should you be allowed to? There's the danger of infinitely funding the business. You see this on many old restaurant shows where they remake them. Oh, Mr. Robert Irvine goes in to make over a business and owner just keeps pumping more money into the business. It's a sinking ship and they're, putting little pieces of foam floaties on the deck trying to keep the ship afloat. Meanwhile, they're flooding their house. So they're spending all their savings to keep this business afloat. That's what I'm trying to keep you from doing. If you seed a certain amount of capital into the business, at what point can you add more? Are you allowed to add more? Forever? Does it ever get paid back? And is everybody on the same page? So say you and Mrs. Business decide, all right, Mrs. Business says, honey, I'm cool with you starting this business. And you're like, thank you, ma'am. I'm glad I got your blessing. I'm going to go forward with this. I'm going to use $10,000 of our savings because we are married. So it's our savings to start this business. And she's like, oh, that's mighty fine. Get after it. And you use the $10,000 and you're like, dang, I need $5,000 more. I don't really want to ask Mrs. Business for $5,000 more because she's going to give me all sorts of crap about why and what's going on. And is it, oh my God, is it failing? And why were you this far off? So I'm just going to drop $5,000 in the business account from my personal account. Oops. How did that happen? And hope Mrs. Business doesn't find out about it. And then a little bit later, Mrs. Business finds out about it and goes, what the F? Where did $5,000 go? And you're like, oh yeah, I needed that. And she's like, when were you going to tell me? And that's where you give the look of deer in headlights, truck coming at you. You made a mistake. You're sleeping on the couch. So think about this. If you partner with somebody to start a business and you both put in an equal amount of money and the business needs more, are you both okay putting in more money? People don't think about this, and it's a very realistic situation. If you commit to bootstrapping your business, meaning the business pays for growth in the business, that's great. That's going to take time, depending on how successful your business is, and that may constrain what you can do within the business. That's not a bad thing. Constraint's often a very good thing, but you have to commit to that. And that's one path. Some people, I don't know, that can handle that path. It's a slower path. It's a harder path. You must be more disciplined to go down that path. So watch what you're doing when you fund it. Know where this money is going. Set limits. Define these things. Think about it in advance. Make sure everybody's on the same page. We don't want financial surprises. Financial surprises are divorce seeds. You want a reason to get divorced? Financially surprise your spouse about a lot less money in the account that you never told them about. That's a seed for divorce, or at least a seed for resentment. The other part of our financial situation is a person is debt. So we need to look at our total debt, all of it. mortgages, student loans, credit cards, car notes, lines of credit. Let's look at it all. How much do we have in debt? Because you might have $20,000 in savings, but if you have $30,000 in credit card debt, your old scale is -10 to the bad side. You have no money and you shouldn't be starting a business. Let's look at the debt you have. Let's look at the interest rate on the debt. You typically want to pay off higher debt first. There's a lot of strategies with dealing with debt. Dave Ramsey talks about all those, like pay off the smallest things first, pay off the highest things. There's tons of strategies you can look up. But if you have high interest loan debt, we can argue over what high means. I'd say if it's over 7.5%, it's considered high. Most credit card debt's very high. Car loans today are pretty high. Student loan, depending on when you got the loan, could be high, could be low. My mortgage, I got it back in 2011 and it's extremely low. There's no need to pay that off. That's free money. But if I had a 20% credit card debt, I would want to pay that off really soon. The reality is, if you have a bunch of debt, you're not in a position to be starting a business. I mean, if we just shove aside the maturity part of it, not that debt is tied to maturity, financial maturity, that is, but I think it's a good sign. If you have a bunch of personal debt, you're closer to financially irresponsible than financially responsible. Maybe it wasn't your fault. You got sick or some sort of disease, but getting the spenditis when you were younger and buying a whole bunch of crap and going on vacation and going out to bars does not qualify as a good excuse. So if you have debt, you're going to have to decide what you're going to do. This is on the personal side before we even start the business. That's what we're looking at here. I have some savings, but I also have some debt. Am I cool rolling with this debt, carrying the debt as I start the business? Because the debt's not going away until you pay it off. Some people, when they start a business, they give up a full-time job to start a business. So you have debt, you're giving up full-time income to take a chance at making full-time income. That's scary. Be careful doing that. So you need to decide if you have debt, do you carry it? Do you pay it all off now? Do you pay some of it? Can you renegotiate the terms? There's not a right answer. It comes down to what do you want to do? I would not be comfortable carrying a bunch of debt when I started a business. I just wouldn't. That's not me. If I just had a newborn baby, I wouldn't start a business because it's going to be stressful with a newborn. Why do I need that on top of starting a business? And I want to enjoy the newborn. So it's just, what are you okay doing? Be careful that you don't make a bad decision here and compound already bad mistakes. Usually, debt is the result of past missteps, and decreasing your income and taking on more risk while spending money to take on the risk, because that's another way to think about a business, is you're not guaranteed anything. So it's risky when you start it, and you're paying to take the risk because you're going to have to pay to buy supplies and stuff. That might not be the best move. Just be very, very careful here. Once you've sussed out your savings and your debt, we need to look at our living expenses. What are you currently spending money on? If you don't know how much money you're spending on a monthly basis, how do you know how much you need? And if you don't know how much you need, how do you know if your business is good enough to support your lifestyle? You have to, as a lifestyle business, design it for the reality of your life. If you don't know what your life is, you can't design the business. This isn't we're going to make $1 billion business. And of course, we're going to cover our life expenses when we're a billionaire. We're trying to make 100 grand in gross revenue on a farm, of which we might take home 40K in net income. Can we survive off 40K? That's the situation many people are in. So this is where it goes down to, we got to start thinking, is this a hobby? When do I need to start the business? When does it need to pay for my lifestyle? If my spouse has a job too, can they cover this side of things? Another important consideration, if your living expenses are $2,000 a month and your spouse brings home $2,000 a month, that's great. They're paying for living expenses. Your money's now gravy. You're not under the gun to make as much money. When you look at living expenses, these are all the things you need to think about. There's fixed and semi-variable. Don't worry so much about the categorization of these things. It's rent, utilities, food, gas payment, cars, variable and optional expenses. The big things matter. The little things don't matter as much. Your rent, your car payment, student loans, insurance, those are the ones that are going to take the biggest chunk of the pie, the expense pie. So you don't have to account for every little thing. You can track all of this on apps now. It's amazing what we have access to. You just connect your accounts, your credit card to these apps, and you can start to categorize it. Makes it really easy. The only excuse is you're just not putting in the effort to do it. It's not a technology thing. I remember trying to do this back in college off of CD-ROM software like MS Money, and it was terrible. You had to log everything in by hand, and hey, our grandparents did it by pencil. So we have it really easy. You don't have to capture it all. Some people are like, oh, this is too hard. I can't get it down to the nearest penny. It doesn't matter. If you're close to the nearest 500, that's good enough in most cases. Whether you spend $2,600 or $2,300, it's close. You just don't want to think you spend 26, but you actually spend 4,600 a month. You should estimate high. So you build in a fudge factor. So if you think your monthly expenses are $2,200, let's put we actually spend $2,500. In case costs go up, in case we spend a little more, we actually buy the brand name food this month. We shop at Walmart instead of the thrift store. So our expenses went up. And you don't have to write anything down. Very few people pay with cash anymore. So your debit card, your credit card, they already track all this. You just need to put that data in a form that you can actually read. And that's why apps are so critical here. So even if you decide a business isn't right for you, this is something you should do. It would benefit you greatly doing in 2025 is figuring out all of this personal financial information so you can make more informed decisions, whether that's, can we afford a new vehicle? Can we afford to go on a vacation? Can we afford to put an addition on the house? How are we looking as we save for the future? Knowing these numbers allows you to make those decisions based on reality, not emotions or dreams or wants. It also puts everybody on the same page. If you and Mrs. Business don't agree on things, you look at the numbers and the numbers don't lie. You can both make decisions off the numbers, not what Mrs. Business wants, even though you tell her, well, we can't afford it. She might think you're just saying it because you want the new tool set, not the new carpet. And she really wants that. And she also wants her own fancy, equipment. And you're like, hey, we can't get any of that. Look at the actual numbers. And then she's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Take me to In-N-Out instead. As famed cartoon battalion G.I. Joe once said in the 80s, knowing is half the battle. If you know what you have, if you know what's coming in, if you know what you're spending, it's so much of a clearer picture to make financials decisions. This lets you know where are areas of strength, where areas of weakness, where could you cut back, where could you save? And then you can design the business to this. Imagine going on a trip in a car and your windshield is caked in mud. You can just see through it enough to see the lines on the road, but that's it. Your headlights don't work. The gas gauge and speedometer are broken. In fact, no, they just tell you the number that you want it to say. Oh, I want it to say I'm going 55. And I want it to say the tank's always on full. And two of your tires are flat. How easy is it going to be to get to where you want to go? It's going to be really hard. You don't have any information to do adjustments when the deer runs out in front of you, the semi is rolling over in front of you on fire, and you run right into its flaming death trap. Data, we use it every day in the rest of our life, but we just get scared of it when it's our own finances, because I think a lot of us are afraid to look at our own numbers because it's proof of bad decisions, or it makes us feel like we've underachieved. We're not doing as good as we think we were. The reality is the numbers are the numbers. Whether you pay attention to them or not, if your bank account only has $200 in it, it only has $200 in it. Whether you look at it or not, like, that's all the money you have. You might as well confront it and accept it. So I get how maybe this is a fear of failure. Maybe this is an emotional thing. A lot of finance is. Maybe this is bringing to light bad career moves, or feeling like you wasted time in your life. Or bad mistakes that you made. I shouldn't have purchased that thing. And the only thing I can say is we've all made bad mistakes financially. Everybody has, everybody will. It's acknowledging those mistakes and putting measures in place to make sure that they don't happen again. That's the one gift of mistakes. It's how we learn. I've bought cars I shouldn't have bought, and I've learned not to make that mistake again. And sometimes you have to learn from the school of hard knocks. The other part of the equation we have to look at is, what is our income? Assuming you want to start a business, you probably have a job. Maybe you're unemployed, in which case this part's easy. You can skip it over because your current income is zero. But if you have a partner, Mrs. Business, we'd count, or Mr. Business, we'd count their income. So what do you or your family unit, Mr. and Mr., Mrs. and Mrs., whoever that is, make post-tax? I don't care what it is pre-tax. Like, what do you make post-tax? What do you take home? And if you start the business, will that income go away, stay, or get cut back? It goes away if you quit. It stays if you do the business on the side. And it gets cut back if you go to part-time and start the business. So we need to know that, because this will be critical. We'll use this income to help pay for the stuff that we just talked about in terms of living expenses. We need to think about how much money we're going to need once the business is running. So what are you doing with your job? And really think this through, because there's two paths to starting a business. Well, three. The three paths are: I quit my job and start a business. And if you are starting a business from zero and you quit your job to start it, that's real risky. That's going to be stressful. You better have a ton of money saved up or somebody who you live with that can support you for an extended period of time, potentially years, plural. The other path is you keep your job and you start a business on the side. That can be difficult with certain careers and certain businesses, because if you can't dedicate enough time to the business, it may be hard to even get the business going. If it's a farm and you work a 9-to-5 job, when are you going to work on the farm? You can't do everything by headlight and headlamps. And the other option is to go part-time. I work part-time, partial day, part of the week, and I maintain that. And how long am I going to do that? When does it change? Decide this up front. That income you have is extremely valuable. I think if you ask anybody who has a job and has lost the job that they liked, how appreciative of that income they were when they had it. So somebody's unemployed, like they probably really liked that money when it was coming in. What are your assumptions for the business? So when can the business start kicking in? If it's just you don't have a partner, your salary at your job is $50K, and you're going to start the business on the side. Well, 6 months from now, the business is going to make $500 a month. So now for the year, you've made $56K. Eventually, that keeps ratcheting up. And at some point, you can decide when the business gets high enough, you could either cut back on the career or drop the career. If you're going to have a gap, so our expenses stay the same, but our income goes down, how are we going to make up the gap? What if the business doesn't go as planned? What if we expect it to be making $1,000 a month at 6 months, but it's only making $500? Where's that extra $500 going to come from? What if instead of making $1,000 a month at 6 months, it's $1,000 a month at 12? What are we going to do for those extra 6 months? So this helps you think about scaling and timing. I would say I would err on the financially conservative side. I would not be the person in the wingsuit jumping off the proverbial financial cliff, hoping they don't crash into rocks below and they're going to fly on this suit made of nylon. I'm conservative because I've seen terrible things financially working as a stockbroker and seeing people lose a lot of money in market crashes and freaking out about it, like life savings getting hacked in hours. It's very scary. I've seen my parents get laid off when I was a kid. I've gotten fired. That leads me to be more conservative. If you want the most conservative path, it's this path. If you're in a partnership, one person has a job, one person starts the business. And the person starting the business takes their time and scales and bootstraps the business to try and get it up to produce an income for them first. And then they go from their income to supplement the other partner's income. Then the other partner quits if that's what they want to do. So you start with one income, or you start with two incomes. This person stays here. This person goes down to zero. They start the business. They eventually get back up to their previous income. Now this person keeps working. This person keeps growing the business until they double up. Now this person can quit. We've had our 1 + 1 is 2. That's the most conservative approach. or you start it on the side and you just accept it's going to take longer. The riskier approach may be reckless if you're not financially set up for it. I think it could definitely squeeze into the category of reckless. Would be the I'm just going to do it. I hate my job. I want to do this. And I just jump in. As we talked about earlier, the Mr. Mortgage and expenses, they don't stop. So you're going to have to find some way to keep paying for those. Be very careful. So run the analysis here. How are you going to make up the difference on paper? How are you going to do this? Can you do it with farming? Can you do it with the business that you want? Is there a better option? You might have wanted to go full time from day one and you start realizing, oh my God, what if I don't make money right away? What if we hit half of our goal? Let's say your goal is to make $1,000 a month and that's what you think you can make 3 months from now. I would say plan as though you're making $250 3 months from now. How do those numbers look? And if you're pleasantly surprised on the upside, good, but you're probably not. You're probably more on the downside. So just be careful. And will this business get you to where you need to be? You might want to start selling soap or goat milk or goat cheese or something else. Like, can it realistically do this? This is where dreams come crashing to the earth into the pavement. And they either get destroyed or they stop and just kind of levitate there like, hey, we're going to make it. You may have to shift expectations, so be careful. Insufficient capital is one of the huge reasons entrepreneurs fail. Not businesses. Notice that I think there's a difference here. A business is the entity. An entrepreneur is the person running the entity. Sometimes businesses fail because the entrepreneur failed. And insufficient savings is one reason why. You start running a business and you don't have enough money to pay your month-to-month expenses. That starts getting stressful. You're stressed. You start worrying a lot about the business. You start making bad decisions. You start cutting business expenses. You start doing things you wouldn't otherwise do because life outside the businesses became very stressful. You maybe have to drain the business of its lifeblood, cash flow to pay for your living. And this ultimately leads to the business's demise. You know, like we're riding a horse, but I'm thirsty, so I got to drink the horse's blood. So the horse's blood is keeping me alive, but it's slowly killing the horse. That type of thing. Yeah, gruesome example. I'm sure Mongols or somebody out there's done that. Glad I'm not in that situation. So remember this picture now. I hope this makes more sense. I hope it has a little more context to it. Inflow needs to be greater than outflow to increase wealth, to increase chances of success, to decrease stress. And the inflow now we've realized is business income and personal income, and the outflow is business expenses and life expenses. What if you run this exercise and you start to think, oh, I don't know, my savings aren't enough. Here are ways to start increasing your savings. This is personal savings. This is not business savings. Try and cut large expenses. Small expenses, everybody's like, I'm not going to go to Starbucks. And I get it. You go to Starbucks 7 days a week, that adds up to a decent amount of money. But you save $20 a week. Not really a game changer. in the grand scheme of life. The boat payment for $250 a month, that could really matter. Can you downgrade where you're living? Can you pay off debt that gets rid of interest? Review these purchases. Is there money leaking out that you don't know? I was looking at some data about these subscriptions that people get, because now everything is a streaming service and stuff like that. So many people have streaming services that they don't even use or know that they have. There's a lot of leaky money like that. So look at credit card bills carefully, bank accounts. What is that money going to? Are you actually using it? Did you need it? Did we have to have it? Talk to your partner. You might be the big spender. They might be the big spender. You both might be. If there's one bank account with two spigots and you control one, but you don't control the other, you also have to watch the other spigot. There's most likely, I'd say from talking to couples on the podcast, there's usually a spender and a saver in every relationship. Somebody tends to spend more than the other. You know who you are, and if it's not you, check with them too. So try and cut if you need to build up savings. The other way to build up savings is you increase income. If we go back to this chart here, this right here, this arrow, this is our spending. So we can go from big spending to little spending, but we can also go from little income to bigger income. So we can try and increase income. We could work extra hours. We could get overtime. We could pick up another job, do some consulting. You could maybe get a raise. Maybe you skill up. You postpone starting the job. You say, hey, I'm making decent money. I think I can, move up a position, make a little bit more money over the next year. That puts us in an overall better financial position to start the business next year. You could sell assets. A lot of people have stuff they don't use. Speaking to my fellow Californians that have RVs sitting all over San Diego that never seem to move, I think they're expensive, and they just sit there, and actually you have to pay to have them sit there. Crazy what people do. All right. So our financial situation is sorted. We've determined our income, our savings, our debt. Now we want to start the business. How much do we need to start the business? And where's that money coming from? This goes back to our savings. If we go back to that very, very early slide, we had spendable savings, and we had our spendable we have our total savings, right? So that's what we're talking about now. You have your emergency savings and spendable, and within spendable, you have life support and business support. So now we're going to talk the business support side. Where are you going to, how much money do you need in that account? And again, what do you do if it's not enough? What do you do if you need more? Where does that money come from? Are all parties on the same page? Do you actually need all this equipment? This is the stage where you have to be pretty ruthless. There in farming and all sorts of business, there's all sorts of cool stuff out there. We sell a lot of it at Modern Grower, and a lot of people think they need it. And I would say not everybody needs every tool to start their business. You might be able to get by with less and upgrade over time. So what's the minimum you need to get going? And try and focus on the the need to have versus the nice to have. So what stuff you absolutely need? Functional, cheap, and works now is often better than ideal if you're dealing with a limited budget. If you can buy a used piece of equipment and it takes some DIY labor to get it up and going, and it's not perfect, but it's 80% of what you need and you could save $2,000, giving up that 20% towards the perfect thing, the ideal thing, and keeping that $2,000 in your savings is going to be well worth it in terms of stress. Don't forget to put money into your budget for emergencies, breakdowns, repairs, replacements. You're going to have to pay insurance. You're going to have taxes, so it's not all about the equipment. You'll see a lot of, in books, farm budgets, they don't account for taxes, they don't account for insurance and all this other fees. They often don't have a fudge factor. They don't account for emergency breakdowns. And I would say a truth from talking to a lot of farmers is people underestimate this in the budgeting stage. They don't think it's going to cost as much as it actually does. They might plan for 10 and realize, ooh, it actually took 12. And that's not because they're getting extravagant. It's just because they forgot stuff. So that's why this fudge factor is really important. You're probably going to forget things you actually need to pay into, like insurance and stuff like that. Keep track of these expenses too. If you're going to budget it and then you're going to start buying stuff, make sure you're keeping track of expenses so you know how much you're actually spending and you know where the money's actually going. Don't just assume you're spending it in the right spot. The other tricky part about a business can be managing cash flow. And I won't get too deep into this now, do a whole video on this in the future, but you'll need one chunk of money initially to start the business, to acquire the land and buy seeds and whatever else you're going to buy. But periodically, you're going to need to make payments. Let's say you're leasing the land. So every month, you got to make a lease payment. You're going to have to factor that stuff in. There's not just the initial expenses, but there's expenses that come down the line, and you're going to make sure that you have the cash flow to pay those things at some point in the future. So just because you cover your startup expenses with savings, forecast out your next 12 months of predicted outgoing cash flow. And I'd probably want that in the account too, to assume the business doesn't make any money. If you're doing a business like pastured poultry, you're going to need to buy chickens down the line, chicks. So when are you going to need to do that? You're going to need to buy feed down the line. You're going to need to pay butchering bills. Let's factor all that in. You don't want surprises. And I think this is an area where people will make a mistake. They focus on the stuff they need to buy. They forget the services and they forget the ongoing future cash flow payments that have to come out. So when you budget for your business, budget out the monthly expenses for the full first year and factor that into your startup costs and how much you might need to have available. When you think about income, we're going to do the same thing. What is the income? What are we guessing it's going to be? When is it going to come in? And will this cover our cash flow? So let's say you bought all your stuff to get started, and this is January, and then in April, you got to place another big seed order and maybe buy some potting mix, and that comes out to $500, but your business hasn't started selling at the farmer's market yet, or you don't have a CSA, so you have no money coming in. Where's that $500 coming from? If you don't have the business producing income at that time, you need to account for that. Are you going to pull it out of personal savings or what? So let's forecast that out. Now, let's say expenses are paid. Hey, the business is in the black. It's profitable. So we're moving. We've got our infrastructure. We're now functioning. Let's say we've been in business for a year and our income covers our expenses and we're profitable. What do we do with that income? You need to put some thought into this, I think, ahead of time. Do you use that extra income to hire an employee? What are the pros and cons of that? Do you build up savings in the business? Do you pay down debt, maybe that the business acquired? Do you use it to pay your living expenses? If your living expenses are being covered by a partner and the business shows at the end of the year it's $10,000 profitable, do you pull that money out into your personal side of things just to build up a buffer there? Do you leave it in the business to keep a buffer there? You definitely want to talk to a CPA and decide it would be nice to have a high tunnel next year so we could spend $6,000 out of that 10 and reduce our tax income using that high tunnel as a write-off. That might be an option there. But do think about that, especially if you have a partner involved in the business. And I mean a partner that's not in a relationship with you, a friend or a parent, a brother, sister. Because when the business starts becoming profitable, one person might be real jonesy to pull money out of the business and the other person might not be. Who wins? What's the compromise? Talk this stuff out in advance. It can lead to fighting, those types of things. So we do need to think about this scenario. Let's look at the big picture now. And I know this isn't the sexiest information out there, and it's not like how to make a bunch of money growing microgreens every week, but I think this is truly important information that's under-discussed, and I really hope it helps. Because you now have information to make educated decisions based on reality, not emotional decisions. And you know these answers to these questions and these points. That's the whole point of going through this exercise. We're not winging it. We're planning. We're financial planning. We're putting a plan in place to see where we could go. Now, I know no plan survives the fog of war, but that doesn't mean there's an excuse not to have a plan. My goal or my thought when doing this planning is you keep partners on the same page. I think that's important. So nobody's surprised. I think you set yourself up mentally for what's to come. So you're not shocked when you can't pay your bills. I think it prepares you and gets you thinking about the one part of business people don't like to think about, the financial side, before you even start the business. It cleans up your act financially. So even if you didn't start a business and you did this exercise, you'd benefit from it because you'd be more financially aware of your own situation. This is easy to do. All this stuff is simple. It's just going to require some time, some critical thinking, some discussion with the other people in your life. And it's not the most fun thing, so most people won't do it because it's more fun to sign up for a workshop, take an online course, read a book, or just start planting seeds than it is to do any of this. And that's why a lot of people tap out. It's not that they can't grow. It's they just weren't prepared financially. You wouldn't enter a UFC fight without training. You wouldn't enter a UFC fight without scouting the person you're going against, without the proper gear. You're trying not to get killed. You want to survive. And that's the same in business. Now, when you do business, keep in mind it also isn't all about the money. I do like to bring this to light because these are lifestyle businesses. We're not beholden to shareholders or a VC firm, a venture capital firm. There are other forms of capital that you get whenever you start a business. And these are the 8 forms of capital created by Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landaway. You gain all these things whenever you do anything. So if you start a business, you'll gain some financial capital, cultural capital, and I'll show you on the next slide what these things actually are. So even if you have a business that's not successful, you'll still gain experience, wisdom from it. You likely made some relationships along the way. Maybe you helped plant some trees. This isn't a sugarcoat or a Band-Aid for somebody who's bleeding out financially, but a failed business is a failed business. But it's not just a loss in a vacuum. There's other things you learn from it. If you ask somebody out on a date and they reject you, you learned a little something about yourself. If you enter a sporting event and you don't win, you learn something about yourself. If you enter a contest and you don't win, you learn something. We all gain these other forms of capital anytime we do something. So keep in mind, you are pulling other things out of this. If you're running a farm, keep in mind I'm saying keep in mind a lot. If you're running a farm and you have a family, income is one of your net gains. What else do we gain that's a little harder to quantify? Time around our family, seeing our kids grow up, raising amazing food, living in an amazing place, being our own boss, controlling our own schedule. Okay, so we're getting more than just the dollars in the bank account at the end of the day. So don't just measure success by the dollars. But if you want to be sustainable as a business, it does come down to the money at the end of the day. How do you measure success and progress here? You're going to have to actually track numbers. You're going to define what's good. Are we acquiring more customers? Is that the metric we're using to show we're making progress? Is it net sales every week? Is that our progress metric? And are we meeting expectations? Because you have to have some expectations. Because how do you know if you should keep doing it? If I just said, I'm going to give you a business that makes $1,500 a month, do you want it? The answer might be yes. The answer might be no. If you have to do no work and it's passive and you just take the $1,500, yes, I want it all day. But if it requires you 40 hours a week to run that business to get the $1,500 in income, but you need $2,500 a month in income to survive, that's not going to work. So something that could be perceived as good might not actually be good in your own situation. So set your own expectations and your own reality. Things to think about in the long term. So this is next level thinking when the business gets going. You want income anti-fragility. I'm a big believer in that. So think about developing multiple income streams, not day one, but down the line. Let's think about what are we going to do with long-term savings and profit? How much do we want to grow those? How much do we recycle into the business? No right answer there. Comes down to your own context, your own thoughts. And be aware that you can't draw every bit of money out of the business. You're going to need some money there eventually to improve things, to do maintenance, to do replacement, to do repairs. So don't plan on squeezing every dime out. When you think about your context, that's your own situation, your unique situation. My situation is going to be different than your situation. So my plan is going to look a little different because I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I have a mortgage that costs so much. I live in California. That's very different than your situation. One enterprise might not be enough. So if you started making the soap might only be part of it. You might need to sell soap and salves and lotions and something else. It might not be able to scale to where you want to go. You might be able to raise eggs, and that's not enough. You might be able to just do a market garden, and you think, well, I want to do that, but it doesn't get our whole family to where we want to go. So we also have to add another enterprise. Think about the business that you want to live. Forget the perfect farm by some farmer that's promoting it on a course that they're selling, or some farmer in New York saying you got to do it this way, or one of the books you read. There's base principles to make market farming work. We can't ignore that. But you decide, what's the quality of life I want? How many hours do I want to work? How much money do I need to make? What do I want to do to sell? Do I want to work with people? And then you can try and find a business that fits that. It might be farming, it might not be. So make sure that the business you design meets your context for who you are and where you want to go. There are limits to that. You're not going to be a, analyst that, does play-by-play for a football team and I don't want to travel ever. So there's trade-offs, right? You got to understand that. But just the point here is design the business for the lifestyle that you want to live, and realize that your first business might not work. It might be practice for the second or the third or the fourth. I've ran, I'll say, 3 businesses. One was just too small to really matter. It was successful, but it was insignificant. One didn't work, but I learned a ton from it. A lot of those connections are what has me here today. And the third one has worked so far. So don't lose sight that if you're of the entrepreneurial vibe, it may take a couple swings of the bat to get to first base, and then eventually get around the bases and get that home run. So this might be practice. Don't blow yourself up financially on try number 1, because if you blow yourself up financially, you might blow up your life and your family, and that'll demoralize you, and you'll never want to do this again. So it is very much live to see, fight another day. There's a lot of ways you can kill yourself financially. Here are some of them. This can be a whole video, but I just wanted to leave you with this. A lot of it involves spending too much too fast on one thing all up front. You have to be careful taking on debt and just not matching reality with expectations, fighting reality. I need this business to pay for our family's expenses. The business just isn't there yet. So be cautious of that. A big one in every business is people don't look at records and they don't analyze them. They don't know where money goes. They just spend. It's easy to spend. It's harder to see where you actually spent the money on. People transition too quickly. And I said here, emotions trumped Excel, meaning the desire, the want to farm beat out what the numbers said. The numbers might say you should start next year, but the want says I'm going to start this year, and that can be dangerous. If you grow the business too slow, that can be a problem. Again, you need money to live off of. Being extremely frugal can be demoralizing. Nobody wants to live off ramen noodles, although ramen's very gourmet today. Budget ramen noodles and white bread. Reward yourself, even if the business isn't making much money. Doesn't mean you're spending a ton, but take some time to say, hey, I made $100 this week. I'm going to spend $20 on something that I can just waste. That's okay once in a while. You earn the money. You're allowed to spend some of it reasonably, not out of control. And some people just get in bad partnerships, bad agreements. You start a business with a friend and it destroys the friendship. You realize we should have never done this. We were great friends. We're terrible business partners. You do that with a family member. It can be the same way. You can't avoid that. Those things just happen. This has been financial planning for the entrepreneur. I hope this information helped. If you want me to go over any more sections of this in detail, let me know. If you have any comments on this video, I'd love to know what you thought. Drop them below. I'll make more videos on the finance side of business in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn more, you can do so on my podcast, which you can find right here. But until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.